Kumi. Today, my guest is the presidential candidate of the Action Alliance, Major Hamza Al-Mustafa, retired. Welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank
Major
you so
Al-Mustafa.
much. It's my pleasure.
Before we go into the details of your campaigns and to talk about the elections generally, let me point you to something more recent, and that's the budget presentation by the president. 20.51 trillion naira is the budget presented by the president to the National Assembly. Likely that figure will increase. If you become president in 2023, that's the budget which you will be working with. What are your thoughts on it?
Numerous things comes to mind. First of all, I have been following this country for decades and looking at numerous genesis that is retarding Nigeria. Some of the issues some of us will come up with might not be palatable in the ears of some, but definitely it is in the best interest of Nigeria. If you are seeking for governance, realism, truths or facts in your hands are what you should be seen to work for or with for the common good of Nigerians. There is something called dirty budget politics. In countries earmarked to either be retarded or be destroyed. Looking at the journey so far, there are numerous things people have not been talking about. And in Nigeria, evidently as it is, Nigeria has been targeted for decades never to grow. We shall re-examine the contents, the figures, and the implementation. Here, I have seen and I listened to the summary, and we are still studying it. But to me, there is so much to be desired, and when time comes, if God Almighty bestow upon us the opportunity to preside over Nigeria, we will be very scientific, we will be very prudent, we will also be seen to be very strategic in looking at budget. You know, budget anticipatory measures from capital and recurrent, there are numerous politics involved. If you take, for example, 2022 budget, and you look at from January to this year, in retrospect, and look at the performance of the budget, you have so many big question marks from the institutions that you have, and then from what it is earmarked for Nigeria, you have a lot of big question marks. So it was decades and decades past. And to us, this country deserves much more in terms of budget implementation. It is one very hard nut to break, but we have the know-how. We look at duplications and waste in spending, and we look at figures that never add up, and we look at the foolishness with which the executive arm of government is in most cases abused, where misrepresentation of facts and figures are presented, where performance of budgets are given in terms of percentages. If it is given in quota A, when quota B comes and you add it up, you might not end up seeing the same thing. So we have been particular in looking at it with eagle eyes to be able to know what the budget was meant for, its conception, preparation, and to the stage of implementation lies a headload for us to understand and to know that there are games. Once we come, we shall not continue with what we meet. And I'm not coming to say because...
So you would review the budget when you come in?
Definitely, there are things we know, and there are things we will bring to the fore. I will tell you this. If you examine Nigeria today, the presidency, the executive arm of government, and indeed the legislature are saddled with two major problems. One, institutional failure. So when you have institutions that do not function, you do not have actually the right figures you desire to have for the country to work with. Dirty budget politics is a scheme where some certain foreign hands are involved, where investors who do not care about your country comes to the fore, where ideas that are just there for the sake of it, fiction, also comes in. That's why if you, for example, take, say, 2021's budget and look at it from today and re-examine it from Nigeria's point of view. You will be ashamed and you'll be worried about the percentages that got to be implemented. And that's the worry we have. So at the end of the day, you are busy rather than implementing a budget with an excellent intention, with a good vision. But at the end of the day, what you are doing is working backward. Now, promoting inflation, creating more hardship to your people, killing your currency, and promoting your enemies who are sitting elsewhere, and then having a budget that is performing for themselves. You are having institutions that are duplicated. We have done quite a hell lot of work on this in knowing where we are as Nigerians. Maybe this is strange to hear from me. Maybe other people have not done, but we spend so many years working in knowing what the budget is all for, and that's how we got to know the scheme called dirty budget politics having its way in Nigeria.
You know, the implementation of the budget, as you mentioned, is quite important. If you look at the 2023 proposed budget,
right.
Capital expenditure is just about 5-point-something trillion.
Right.
And the budget has a deficit of 11 trillion.
Right.
So when you look at that, many would question what impact 5.3 trillion naira would have on the population, especially because releases for capital budgets in the past years have not been up to par.
Right.
We've almost not had 100% release across board.
Right.
But with a deficit of 11.1 trillion naira, put side by side with a capital expenditure of 5.3,
right.
Would you borrow to fund this budget?
No, I will not borrow.
So how would you get the financing?
Very good, and I thank you so much for this question. To tell you the enormous work we have done. First of all, the previous budgets, in our investigations, looking at it in retrospect, has presented to us duplications and waste. Waste of resources, waste in terms of servicing structures that are duplicated from numerous ministries. And these are the ones managing the economy. They are in the major ministries, and there are numerous of such that are there. Some came to the fore when the MDGs and the rest were created. So it became an avenue where budgets are meant for tiny little cells with 4 or 5 people. You see 80, 50, 90, 100 plus billions being budgeted for those. But if you sit down and look at what it is budgeted for, and look at the major department in other major ministries, you can understand the colossal waste going on. And people have enjoyed it, and it is going on. Keep that aside. The issue of wealth creation from outside Nigeria is something new to Nigeria's mainstream understanding in governance. The issue of also curtailing waste and creating resources from at home. Let me give you a tiny little example. God has blessed you with gas. Also, in the process of taking it, your environment is by the day, being destroyed. But this destruction, these seeming deaths, if we sit down and look at international market, if we have bothered to do an investigation in knowing what it is at the international scene, there are numerous openings in the world who are desirous of what you consider as debts. We take 11% out of your gas deposit. That you have, the small one. We're not talking about the major 3.176 trillion. No, from what you have alone. For you to be able to augment, get your structures adjusted, get people to be accountable, and get institutions to be functional, you can draw from out of a certain arithmetic we have done. 11% of what you have is going to create $201 billion. As at June this year, every state can boast of itself, and you can have all the industries you have. You can have employment. Employment issue will be a bygone thing, because there will be, all industries can come. What we are talking about is making Nigeria to be productive, to be seen to be exporting rather than importing. And we have all it takes to be. We have all it takes to be the world market.
So that's like a long-term goal.
No.
With regard to funding this 2023 budget, which
Correct.
you say
Yes.
that you will not borrow for.
Right, we will not.
Where will you get the fund in such a short time?
Already, I have just told you about 11% of something that is already here. The market is already there. It's a matter of negotiation. In terms of which it is done. Remember, we're also going to curtail so much from the West that we knew of from the previous budgets. Add it up all together, then